All right. Thanks. Good morning. This is a workshop in case number 25-1955, which involves the petition of Green Mountain Power Corporation for approval of a multi-year regulation plan pursuant to 30 V.S.A. sections 108, 209, 218, and 218D. My name is Ed McNamara. I'm the chair of the Vermont Public Utility Commission, and with me today are Commissioners Margaret Cheney and Riley Allen. Also present are Commission staff members Jacob Davis, Andrea Popiti, and Dan Burke. So before we get started, I just want to make sure everyone understands the purpose of today's workshop is to assist the Commission in understanding GMP's proposed MYRP. Today's workshop, including GMP's presentation and any responses to questions during the workshop, will not be part of the evidentiary record for this case, unless the Commission on its own motion or on the request of a party specifically enters that information into the evidentiary record. So I'm going to start by taking appearances, starting with the department, please.
Hi, good morning. My name is Erin Brennan. I'm special counsel with the Vermont Department of Public Service. I have Ben Civiletti with me. He's my co-counsel in this proceeding, and we have a number of department folks here today. I see Jim Porter, Scott Wheeler, and let me flip to page 2. A lot of people here. And then I see a few people from GDS here, namely Jacob Thomas, Francesca Winter, Josh Strittmatter, and please let me know, Jacob, if I've missed anyone from GDS, but it looks like we have a few people from GDS with us.
Thank you. For GMP.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. This is Jeff Han from SRH Law. With me is Malachi Brennan and also our paralegal, Olivia Voth. And then from GMP, we have our witnesses here this morning. That is Mike Burke, Laura Doan, and Rob Bengal, Maria Fisher, and Josh Castingay. And also listening is Carol Weston.
Great. Thank you. So just going to go over a few logistics before we get to the presentation. So I want to remind everyone who anticipates speaking during the workshop, keep their cameras on when they intend to speak. If you're not sort of up at the moment, feel free to turn the camera off. That helps. I know some folks still with bandwidth. But if you do intend on speaking, please put your camera on. Also, please, everyone stay on mute unless you're talking. As Mr. Burke mentioned earlier, as Dan Burke mentioned earlier, we do not have a court reporter transcribing today's workshop. We're recording the workshop using Microsoft Teams software. And then afterwards, the clerk will issue a memo with a link to the recording. In terms of format, so understand that GMP is going to be bouncing around a little bit with different people presenting. I would like us to ask questions as we go along, so please use the raise hand function as you have questions. And also just a reminder, and this is probably more for the GDS folks than anything else, because this is a contested case, this is the Commission's best opportunity to talk directly or ask questions directly of GMP. So if I cut you off on questions, I encourage the department to ask questions. However, I will remind the department that they have lots of opportunities for questions, and we don't have as many. So if it looks unfairly weighted in questions, that's where that is coming from. All right, why don't we get started? I'll turn it over to you, Mr. Hand.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me just share my screen, make sure this is working. Everyone see that on their screen?
Yes, that's working.
Okay, great. So thank you, Mr. Chairman. As I said, we have our witnesses here to walk through this presentation. I'm going to start with just an overview of the agenda and the schedule, and then we'll turn it over to the experts. So high-level agenda for today, we'll cover the schedule, provide a little context for the proposed plan. Then at a high level, a summary of what's in the proposed plan. And then we'll turn in more detail to each of the key components of the proposed plan. Happy to answer questions as they come up, as you said, Mr. Chairman, or take questions at the end, whichever is easiest for everyone. Let me start with the schedule, just to set the context here. We filed a proposed plan in August of 2025. We're here today at the workshop in this case. From November through June of 26, we'll have discovery and testimony in this proceeding. The Commission's approved schedule anticipates aligning this regulation plan review with GMP's upcoming FY27 rate case, which we will be filing in January of 26. All of that culminates in a combined technical hearing in June of 26. And we are anticipating a PUC order by September 1st of 26, and that would allow the 30-day statutory period from plan approval for it to go into effect on October 1 of 26. And that aligns with GMP's current plan, which runs through September 30th of 2026.
Mr.
Okay.
Hand?
Yes.
So there is a public hearing scheduled for December 11th. That's not on your schedule, but I thought this would be a good opportunity to ask a question about notice and how GMP intends to provide notice to customers.
Yeah, thank you. This was really a high-level summary of the schedule.
Yeah.
Understand that there are intervening pieces. We are in the process of getting the customer notice out. I don't have the exact update, but I'm pretty sure that is headed out. And as GMP has done in the past, there will also be indication on its website and in other means to get that information out. It sounds like the PUC is also potentially anticipating another public hearing for the rate case. And so there'll also be time and opportunity for customer notice for that as well.
Okay, when it comes to putting it on the website, does GMP usually put it right on the homepage in a very easy to find location? Or
I may have
will
to
you?
follow up. I may have to follow up on the exact location. I know that it is typically posted there, and if I can get that information during this proceeding, I'll confirm.
Okay, I think it would be helpful if you just made a filing letting us know when it's posted on the website. That would be helpful. So we
Of
have a
course.
chance to look and see where it is, and because I wanted to bring up something that the commission has pointed out in the last few base rate adjustment orders, where we've received a lot of public comments on those in those cases for the last 3 years. And so, it's really important that the customers have an opportunity to see what's happening in this case and in the MYRP case. So the notice of the public hearing is obviously, a very important thing. And in the last base rate adjustment case, the commission pointed out that it would be helpful to have a summary of the MYRP, considering that it's a very detailed regulatory document and understanding how it applies to their bills and to rate changes. And I did some searching on the website, and I couldn't find anything to that effect. So I'd like to suggest that would be something that GMP could develop and have a link to as part of the public notice to the hearing, and that would be helpful. Is that something that you think would be possible?
Thank you. Yes, we agree that getting that sort of information out is important. I know Mr. Burke addresses some of the customer notice and update issues in his testimony directly, and we'd be happy to work on that and follow up after the hearing with how that's been posted.
Great, and especially this summary. The commission also emphasized the importance of customer-facing documents to educate the customers. And just in that, I just did a little bit of digging on GMP's website just to see, like, you know, what is out there right now. And there was a definition of terms on bills document that was from June of 2017. And so, you know, that's pretty out of date. And then there was a how do I read my energy statement document from 2015. So, like, I think those in and of themselves are really helpful, but it would definitely benefit from some updating in light of, you know, what's changed since those timeframes, and especially if those could be linked to as part of the public hearing notice. So just wanted to put that out there too.
Great. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, and I just wanted to bring that up now because I didn't see another point in the presentation that it would make sense to kind of flesh all that out. So I hope that's helpful, and I will go back and look at Mr. Burke's testimony in more detail as well. So thank you for pointing that out. And I see Mr.
Yeah.
Allen has his hand up too. Commissioner Allen?
I'm sorry. I was having trouble taking the mic, opening the mic. Just one question about, so there's going to be a rate case filing, but I just wanted to be clear. I think I know the answer to the question, but I mean, this is not just kind of a single year rate case filing. This is a thing that will include all information we'll need to know to essentially infer rates over a multi-year rate over the multi-year rate plan, including, you know, numbers on the resilience investments and those sorts of things. Is that correct, Mr. Hand?
That's correct. The plan is for the 4-year period. Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, I think, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, do you have a follow-up? Okay, we'll get back to the presentation. So I will turn it over to Mike Burke to provide some further context for the plan.
Thank you, Jeff. Good morning, everybody. So just high level on why the MYRP is, you know, the previous 4 years, we've seen some real variability in things happening, everything from the Russian invasion to the pandemic and other inflationary issues that landed on us during these last 4 years. The MYRP allowed for a lesser immediate rate impact by being able to use the smoothers and other mechanisms within the MYRP to spread those costs out over the full 4-year time frame of the plan. We propose to continue that. We think it's helpful for customers to have less of an impact in real time, and that's something we'd like to continue. We plan to continue our strategic resilience work that was approved and started in the ZOE order. And we plan to incorporate learnings in engineering, design, cost and benefits, and the reliability outcomes that we've learned from the projects that are just being completed now and were completed recently, and build that into what we propose in each year when we file our base rate filing, starting with the filing in January for fiscal year 27. We also plan to continue propose to continue our innovative pilot programs. You know, this certainly helps us take advantage of new products, services that can benefit customers that we're allowed to bring to bear quickly under the pilot program. Next slide, Jeff. So this is just a little bit more context. I'm not going to go deep on weather. I know we all know what's happening, but you know, we continue to see severe weather impacts. Just last Thursday and Friday, storm that deepened and got stronger than we thought, ended up 500 events, 30,000 customers knocked out, which just when we get out of the summer season, gradient wind kicks in, and there we are. You know, we did a climate study out through 2050 that showed a 6 to 10% increase in wet snow outages and wet snow. And, you know, the comparison of the 11 years prior to 2019 versus the last 4 years, we've actually seen a 19% increase. So that continues. Just a couple other climate things that I would say are anomalies are we had a nice storm in April. I've been here 29 years. Those are usually in January, February, maybe December timeframe, not April. And then we just experienced extreme drought, more or less from about the mid part of July up until mid-October, early October. That was really concerning in terms of wildfire concerns. Happy to report we've gotten a fair amount of rain, and that's knocked that down. Again, the economic pressures that the MYRP helped with, inflation, higher interest rates, the energy market volatility from the Ukraine war, supply chain issues. We're certainly hoping to see less of that. In fact, things seem to be stabilizing, but the unknowns are still out there. And then we're hearing,
Mr. Burke.
Yes, sorry. Yes, Commissioner.
I'm sorry, I didn't know when to interrupt you. I apologize. Yeah, I just wanted a clarification on that 19%. Is that an annual rate of kind of events that you're pointing to, or is it something that, and does that include all categories, or is that just wet snow?
That is just wet snow. The company that did the original climate study, when we were filing this MYRP, we reached out to them and asked them to do a study of what they forecasted versus what we were seeing over the last 4 years. And it was the 19% is in comparison to the 6 to 10% prediction on wet snow only. And it's over the 4-year plan. Over the last 4 years versus the 11 years, not annually.
I have a clarifying question.
You.
You mean in wet snow outages, not just wet snow, correct?
Correct. But they did draw a correlation to the warmer temperatures creating more wet snow. But yes, it was wet snow outages. Thank you. And that does fall in line with just the warmer temps we've been seeing in the winter. You know, if you hover around 32 degrees, it's always wet snow. We'd love it to be 20 all winter. That's what we're hoping for this winter. The last bullet, that's what the graphs show. And then the last bullet, we just continue to hear from customers and the greater reliance, whether it's remote work, medical devices, safety. This past storm, we lost a circuit in Dover during the 50-mile-an-hour winds. And about 20 minutes after the outage, we had a extremely concerned customer calling in already about only having 3 hours of oxygen. So the world is just changing out there. People at home need the power on. Thank you, Jeff. Next slide. So in this MYRP, we're incorporating some new metrics that we really think help show the customer experience a little bit better than some of the existing metrics we had before. The department was actually really helpful here in pointing us to some different metrics to not only to help them understand what we were seeing, but to also make it a little clearer on what's happening out there versus just a system-wide average. So this is just an example of customer hours out in a year. When we were going through the Zero Outage Initiative filing, which is when we were asked to do these, it was still in 2024, so we were looking at 2023, so we kept those as the example. So a customer in GMP living in the Colchester district, you can see 8 to 16 customers experienced, 707 customers experienced about 8 to 16 outages. That was the max in that district. Where if you look at the Brattleboro district, which is where we're doing a lot of the work and, where we're experiencing more of the severe weather due to the geography, you've got almost 2,700 customers that were out over 100 hours in that same time frame that year. So just extreme swings that, your system average of, say, 2.1 outages a year for 2 hours or so really don't tell you about. The next slide, Jeff, just a continuation of another report we'll be using. Yes, Commissioner, sorry.
Yeah, just on the last slide, thank you. Understand what you're saying here, but in my mind, this is very, just to play devil's advocate, this is very similar to looking at statewide numbers and then as opposed to breaking it out by distribution utility, those numbers are going to look vastly different. So understanding that GMP is by far the largest utility in Vermont, you're always going to have discrepancies based on districts, or you would expect to have discrepancies based on district, just as we expect to have discrepancies based on co-ops. Just the formation 100 years ago, or 70, 80 years ago, the formation of co-ops, how those were formed. I think there's a lot of history that leads to the differential experience of different customers in different areas. So I just want to flag that and see if you have any thoughts, responses.
Yes, I do think there is going to be different reliability outcomes in different areas. I think what we're pointing out here is just the extreme, 10 times the amount of hours versus 2 times the amount of hours. So it's more just the extremes in customer experience than the differences between areas. So,
thank you. It's helpful.
And then again, the Bill Jordan specifically asked for these during the docket, and it was helpful again. And just to take the 2 on the top, the previous slide was hours. This is actual interruptions in a year. So customers experience interruptions, outages. And again, you can see Colchester, 8 customers had 8 outages, where you start at the 10 all the way up to 18 before you drop below 100. And just the extreme difference in the customer outages from one area to another that can be masked within the system average. Next slide, Jeff. So again, to go back the first slides, we want to continue the resilience work based on the learnings and findings from the work we're doing right now. Each year we would propose work up to a certain amount based on the findings, the cost benefit analysis, everything that we learn while we're doing the work, along with what's happening in Vermont at the time. Again, reducing and moderating risk to volatility that we've seen. Again, we don't expect, and we certainly hope not to see things that happened during the pandemic, the Russian invasion, everything like that. But the MYRP did help smooth things for customers during that time frame. And then again, the data reporting, I just showed you 2 examples, but there's a lot more in there than just those 2. Those are just 2 that kind of stood out to show the vast differences within our service territory.
Great. Thank you, Mike. I think we'll turn it over to Rob now, who's going to speak high level about what's continuing in this plan, and then we'll talk about the updates in more detail after that.
Good morning, and Commissioner Riley.
Sorry.
Commissioner Allen, excuse me.
I'm sorry, I did want to ask one more question of Mr. Burke. It relates to resiliency investments, and I just wanted your perspective on essentially the pacing. What is needed and why? How are you thinking about the pacing of these resilience investments going forward, and in relation to what is likely to come forward in your rate filing?
The pacing will be dictated by the learnings on the projects that we've recently completed. So we've learned a lot just in the year since we've started, and we believe we can do more. And we're also seeing the benefits that have come out of these areas just in this event this past weekend, and also in the ice storm. We did not respond to any areas that we've recently completed. The risk to the customers was gone, the cost of responding was gone, and the risk to the crews out there. So what we plan to do in terms of pace is look at what we've done in the previous year, what we're capable of doing in the next year, and also looking at the areas that we feel need that expedited work to be done. So it'll be a combination of what we can do, what we feel needs to be done to get certain areas more resilient against the storms we're having. And with all that data learned from the previous, we would bring that forward each year with an amount.
Will rate impacts factor into your calculus?
Correct. The cost benefits and what the customers are seeing from what we've done. Yes.
Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner. Mr. Bingle, you want to hit this slide?
Sure, Jeff. Good morning. Big picture is that we are keeping most of the elements of this MYRP the same. With the current MYRP, we had a traditional cost of service in 2023, and then we did annual base rate filings for 24 through 26. With this plan, we plan on proposing a cost of service for 2027 that would be fully litigated, and then we would do updates for 28 through 30. The items on the left are what's working and what we will keep the same. And then we'll touch upon the updates in subsequent slides. But when it comes to capital, we propose to submit our 2027 capital spending. And then in subsequent years, we'd be held to a certain amount of plant placed into service. For O&M, we have a few buckets that we would like to keep the same. And Laura Doan will touch upon those later. ROE, we will set that, we will submit a number for 2027 that'll be reviewed and then set by the PUC. But in subsequent filings, we will go and use the same methodology we've used for quite some time now, which is we adjust it based upon the change in the 10-year Treasury rate. We propose to keep our smoothers and adjusters. And then we will have keep our existing annual metrics report and our innovative pilot structure. Next slide, please. So just like what we did in 2023, we had a litigated 2023 cost of service. And then we had smoothers that we had for 24 through 26. We propose to do the same as well. So 2027 will be a standalone cost of service filing. And then we will do updates for 28 through 30 with the option to smooth 28 through 30. And then when the subsequent 29 filing comes along, to smooth 29 and 30. It depends, frankly, on the rate path and what sort of volatility we see when we do these forecasts. So that's why we're requesting the option, but not necessarily we will do the rate smoothers. We are proposing to keep our revenue adjuster, power supply adjuster, and major storm adjuster essentially as is. And then we are also requesting to eliminate the major storm fund pre-collection. Since we filed last time, we've had some netting that has occurred, and it just isn't necessary for this pre-collection. Also, we've gotten customer feedback that having 2 storm lines on a customer's bill is less than optimal, and so we'd like to remove it. And then lastly, we propose to keep the ESAM, but we would like to update a couple items. For example, property taxes, because there is some volatility there. Next slide, please.
Mr. Bingo?
Yes.
Oh, let me just okay. So I just have a logistical question about the quarterly adjusters and the filings that we receive. So we only receive a tariff filing, and customers are only noticed if there's a change in the rates, correct?
Correct.
And I know that in there could be some benefit in letting customers know when there's no change. It's just something to kind of consider and think about, that if customers are receiving notification when there's an increase, but they're not receiving notification when there's no change. And when I look back at the quarterly filings, there's been times when there hasn't been a change at all for a whole year. And so, you know, I'm just kind of thinking that that might be something worth GMP thinking about is, you know, would it be helpful for customers to know when there's no change so that they can see, you know, that stability that's happening there?
Duly noted, and we will discuss internally, and but we take your point seriously.
Yeah, and okay, and then, you know, just you know, some of the concerns that I've seen from customers is about, you know, having a the surcharge, and like you talked about, you know, removing the major storm so that there's not two storms. I think that's interesting to, you know, to address some of the concerns from the customers. But I'm wondering, I think in the past that GMP might have implemented a change to the KWH charge as opposed to having a surcharge. And I'm just wondering, is that something that was considered as you were looking at how the adjusters work versus, you know, the concerns about, you know, having a surcharge versus knowing what people are actually paying for a KWH charge?
Could you elaborate on that a little bit more, please?
So, if the adjuster was to adjust the KWH charge quarterly, instead of increasing a surcharge on a quarterly basis, it would be more transparent what the KWH charge was being, the KWH charge is more transparent as opposed to a surcharge. So I'm wondering if that's something that GMP has considered, changing the KWH charge. And I don't know what the challenges would be associated with calculating that versus the simplicity of calculating a surcharge. So I'm just kind of, you know, wanted to hear from you on that and if that was a possibility.
We did in the past have it based on KWH, at least for the power supply adjuster, and that was because
Yeah.
it was tied to usage. So it was like,
Mhm.
okay, you had different usage of power. So when we had fluctuations in power supply costs, it should be on a per KWH basis. Storm's a bit different, and we would have to get into rate design because some of our
Mhm.
biggest users are C&I large customers, and they're in more populated areas. And so we would have to study that to see whether it would be fair for them to be charged more because of the fact it would be on a per KWH basis for storm costs. But that's
So
why
the
we don't do it.
change, okay. So the change
Uh,
was as a result of incorporating the major storm charge.
Mhm, mhm.
Okay.
I was just going to add, yeah, that netting makes the KWH charge much more difficult. So the way that
Mm,
those adjusters function now with a netting, which has been very good overall for stability and keeping those rate changes to a minimum, makes that kind of KWH approach a lot more difficult.
right. Okay. And then as far as the earnings sharing adjustment mechanism, have you talked about that yet? No.
Uh,
Um,
Just
is it on the next
note.
slide or?
Well, we do have a note on it down below that we propose to keep the same
Oh,
bandwidths. Yeah.
yeah. Um, so, you know, one thing that I've noticed is that there's a, you know, a separate filing on that each year to do that adjustment. And that change gets incorporated into the customer's surcharge for what is called the, I think the current energy and major storm surcharge on the customer's bill. So it doesn't quite match up to, you know, what the, if you're making an earnings sharing adjuster and then incorporating it into the power supply adjustment, it doesn't quite match up there. So I'm just wondering why the earnings sharing adjustment mechanism changes aren't made as part of the base rate filing, or if that's something that was considered, as opposed to having it be, you know, a separate notice to customers, hey, this change is happening and it's going to be incorporated into this surcharge, as opposed to, you know, having it flow through the base rate adjuster. Is it a matter of timing or?
Part of it was timing, and because we begin with this For example, we've had high costs in the past couple of years. And so when we do the filing, the timing is right because the ESAM is a calculation based upon how did the recently completed year turn out. And so it's at the end of November. Our fiscal year ends September 30th. And then it's like, then it becomes a timing issue. And so we do seek to begin recovery in April. We haven't really discussed internally whether to include it in a subsequent base rate filing that would delay it by a year. And it also would cause a little bit of lumpiness because, for example, we've had collections of about $15 million in 2024, and that would cause about 2% of rate pressure, one-time rate pressure, but that would then fall off the next year.
Okay, so it would be possible, but there's some challenges around it.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, thank you. That's my questions on the adjusters.
Next slide, please.
Here we go. So Ms. Fisher, I think you're going to speak to the first couple items.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. In terms of the adjusters, as Mr. Bingle just said, we've proposed to leave both the retail revenue adjuster and the power supply adjuster pretty much unchanged for the new plan. The retail revenue adjuster provides complete decoupling of revenue by truing up any variances between the actual and forecasted retail revenues. The power supply adjusters continues to be broken out into two components. Component A, which is costs largely outside of our control, and then component B, which we do have some control over, and there's a sharing mechanism with an efficiency band that favors customers. I think you
Rob,
can
do you want to
take
address the
next
last two bullets? Yeah.
Sure. So we are planning on keeping the exogenous major storm adjuster definitions the same. The key point on this item is it's only incremental costs. So whatever's in base rates does not count as part of the major storm because that would be a double count. So it's only the incremental costs. And then the definition of a major storm stays the same. I also want to point out that the GMP absorbs the first $1.2 million in major storm costs in each fiscal year. As far as the returns, Mr. Chairman.
I'm sorry, you can finish this and if you want to finish the slide first. Thanks.
In terms of the adjusters, we propose to continue netting them and then also only change customers' bills if a couple of actions take place, which is you can see that's the same direction for 2 consecutive quarters and the carry forward balance is over $1 million. The idea is to not change customers' bills as often as we can.
So thank you. My question is actually for Ms. Fisher. And after experience for a couple of years now with the MYRP and the quarterly adjustments for the power supply, I'm curious as to whether GMP still thinks quarterly adjustments make sense versus annual, biannual, and just picking up on what Mr. Bingle just said about not having as many changes sort of for customers.
Yeah, I think that the quarterly adjustments does continue to work well. It keeps our collections kind of closer in time to when the events are coming. And then, sorry, can you just repeat that last part of the question?
Just there's the keeping the collections somewhat close in time to the events, but then there's also one of the overall goals that I think Mike Burke said early on is delivering smooth, predictable rates for customers, and therefore the quarterly versus biannual or annual changes, which would actually keep smoother costs for customers. That's all.
Right, and I think right now a rate adjustment is only triggered when there's variances in the same direction in 2 consecutive quarters. And so we have in the past not triggered collections. So there's been long periods where we do have total rate stability. And if we move to annual collections, I think that we would have a risk of triggering some quite large collections at a single time and not benefiting from some of the netting that occurs naturally with the quarterly collections. But I mean, it's definitely something that we can look at a bit closer.
Would it be possible to provide an analysis of what the last couple years would have looked like if it was annual instead of quarterly?
We can think about that. I'm reluctant to say definitely right off the bat, just because there is a lot of netting that goes on behind the scenes. I mean, we can definitely show, what actually happened, but yeah, there could be a lot more moving pieces behind the scenes that could make it difficult to go back in time and say this is what it would have been under a different method. But yeah, we can look at that.
Okay, that would be great.
Sure.
Commissioner Allen.
Yeah, Mr. Bingo, I just want to be clear on the storm adjusters. And I maybe this is just kind of a memory refresh, but I thought there was a deductible for each storm event. Do I have that wrong?
It is a one-time annual deductible for $1.2 million.
Okay,
It's
so
based
that
upon
one that yeah.
And it's based on the fiscal year, which is October through September.
Okay, so there's a 1.2 million cost threshold. So if it's a $1.3 million event, that gets included in the total that then gets the 1.5 million adjustment at the end of the year.
If it was a $1.3 million storm, it would depend upon what time of year it was. If that was the first major storm of the year, then GMP would absorb 1.2 million of the $1.3 million.
Yeah, thank you.
All right.
Great.
And next slide. This slide shows how the adjusters have done in the past 3 years. A couple of points to be made. The first one is for revenue and power supply. There have been positives and negatives. So we've both had money returned to customers, but then also we've had to have some collections. Just to give you an idea of the magnitude, for the power supply adjuster, $44 million is a significant amount of money. You do have to realize that it is $500 million of power supply cost each year. And so the variance over that time period, when you consider $44 million over 3 years times $500 million, it's a couple percentage points that we've been off. In terms of retail revenue, we have about $800 million of retail revenue per year, and Itron forecasts that for us. And you can see that out of essentially $2.4 billion, they were off by 5 million, which is really good. The last point on this slide is, as Mr. Burke pointed out, or excuse me, yes, as Mr. Burke pointed out, we have had some fluctuations in storm costs. You can see in 2023, we had a large amount there, $42 million. It does show why we have this on customers' bills as opposed to in base rates, because there is a wide fluctuation year to year in terms of major storm costs. Next slide, please. One item where we are requesting a change is in the carrying costs for these smoothers and also adjusters that we have on our books. We're proposing that we recover the carrying costs at our short-term cost of debt. And that is illustrated. The reason why it's illustrated graphically below. So when we did our filing for 2023, that was in January of 2022. And as Mr. Burke pointed out, everything happened after that filing. And so, for example, on the right-hand side, our short-term cost of debt was 0.84%, and it got up to 6% in 2023 and 2024. It's come down a little bit, but still 5% is a lot higher than what we filed. And then the second part of that is the downstream inflationary pressures we realized through the power supply adjuster, E.S.A. storms, major storms, and so on. And so that's a significant amount of money that GMP has been absorbing the carrying costs for.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Bingle. Mr. Castengay, I think you're up next. Touch on innovation. Oh, looks like
Yeah, I think there's a question.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've got a few questions about the adjusters, actually, before we move on, if that's okay.
Sure.
So in terms of the asymmetry between ratepayers and GMP, I want to make sure that I understand correctly. There's the first piece, at least in the order that it was presented, that is in favor of the ratepayers because GMP essentially like eats some amount of the I forget which component it is, but one component of the adjuster, I think.
So you're talking about the
Yeah.
power supply adjuster. That would be component B. And when it comes to downside risk, GMP absorbs the first $307,000. And if we have a favorable quarter, we keep the first 150. So yes, we absorb more of the downside. The ESAM, that's also true, that we for the first 50 basis points, plus or minus, there's no change there. But when it comes to upside between 50 and 125 basis points, GMP returns 75% of that. Whereas on the downside, we split 50-50 with the customer between 50 and 150 basis points below.
Okay. And so in terms of the quarterly netted adjusters being 2 consecutive quarters in the same direction. So let's say hypothetically, it's a positive for 2 quarters in a row, the netting of the 3 adjusters, if I'm getting that right, that there are 3. When that triggers, the collection is over a 12-month period, is my understanding, unless it's the end of the period of the MYRP. Is there any
I'm sorry to interrupt, but we did request earlier to spread it over the length of the MYRP earlier in the MYRP plan. But now that we're within 12 months of it finishing, now it's the next 12 months. I'm sorry for interrupting.
For the current one, right?
Correct.
And for this filed one, is it to go over the length or is it 12 months?
We have an option on that one in terms of we look at what's in the best interest of our customers because we're trying to reduce volatility. And so when we had some big costs at the beginning of the MYRP, that's why we proposed to spread over the remainder of the MYRP. And so we got, it was in the customer's benefit because then they didn't have such a big increase. The challenge is as you get closer to the end of the MYRP, then you have to recover it over 12 months. Or the next 12 months, and it just causes some upward pressure just because the denominator gets smaller.
Right.
But
was there something else? Sorry.
no, it's just though that we had proposed to recover it over 12 months. But again, we saw, hey, wait, we can actually help the customers out by extending it over a longer period of time, which is the MYRP remainder.
Gotcha. In terms of it being, let's just use 12 months just for example purposes. Then I see you have your carrying cost here on this slide. There's the inflationary pressure also applying, which is like, kind of what this represents, but also not entirely. But the point that I'm trying to get at is
the longer things are things are carried forward, the more the time value of money is acting on those components. And so has there been any discussion or consideration of using an adjustment for the time value of money while the cumulative carry forward balance is being collected?
Would you restate that question, please?
Yeah. So the costs are being paid for, the costs that might be being paid for, say if it's a storm damage situation, say it's replacing poles in January of 2024, then at least I guess one quarter would need to go by. So then maybe April, you if it's carry forward that's in the same direction, you would start trying to collect on those poles that were damaged, or the cost of replacing the poles that were damaged, starting in April. Then if it's a 12-month period, it's going to March of the following year. And so that cost to replace the pole that was actually occurred in January is now, as of 14 months later, still being collected in part. Presumably the cost of replacing that pole in dollar values and just nominal dollars has been acted upon over that period of time, meaning if you're collecting in March 2025 dollars 1-to-1, you're actually collecting less than what it costs to replace the pole in January 2024.
Okay, a couple points to make. First, in our current plan, when we recovered it over the remainder of the MYRP, so when we had those adjusters in the beginning, we did not recover our carrying costs on that. So that was, the company absorbed all of that. The second point is that, and I think what you're going for is we've increased the cost by adding the carrying cost to it. And the point is that if we were to invest the money to replace something, then there really is, the company is just paying, seeking to recover the carrying costs and not seeking to earn any benefit from it.
Right. I guess part of what I'm getting at is without adjusting for the carrying cost, then GMP is actually paying more than it is recovering for, say, one particular pole being
Correct.
replaced over time.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, that's correct. And that's what's happening right now.
Gotcha.
Yep.
All right. Thank you for that. And then in terms of the nature of, and this may not be the best time to ask this question, but it deals with the adjusters, which is the interaction between the base rate and the adjusters. So when adjusters are set at some amount, so say it's a surcharge of in total 10%, just as a like ballpark figure.
It's not that bad.
Then,
it's not that
bad. Okay, 1% then, just then when the Nets base rate filing occurs and say the base rates go up by 1%, then those adjusters are, or do I understand correctly that those adjusters now are acting on a higher base rate? So it's the same percentage, but on a higher base rate, which means more might be being collected, or less in the case that it's negative, but just keeping in the realm of the positive.
Our rates person does a calculation on a quarterly basis. So when we go in and we submit a power supply adjuster, or a revenue adjuster, storm adjuster, et cetera, it calibrates to whatever the current rates are and what the expected revenue is supposed to be for the next 12 months.
Okay, great. Okay, and then I think my last question on this, although I'm always bad about that, the $1.2 million of the threshold for the fiscal year major storm adjuster, why is that still 1.2 million after multiple years of the first MYRP, and now we're here. So again, kind of time value of money. It's the same dollar value now. Why is that?
That is just, it's been that way, and we just are comfortable with that number in the sense that it hasn't changed and that people don't get confused over what exactly we're discussing. That's the only reason.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you very much.
Yep, good question.
I just have a follow-up question on the carrying costs.
Mhm.
Do you have an estimate of what the rate impact is of customers paying for these carrying costs?
Well, let's look at the chart. So we currently have about $70 million of regulatory assets associated with the smoothers and the adjusters. And so our rate is 5% right now, short-term cost of debt. So 5% times 70 million is $3.5 million. And that would be about 1% about 8 point something million. So we're talking about 40 to 50 basis. No, it's below 50 basis points of rate increase. It's probably about 40.
And if there were no adjusters and GMP were just, operating without the adjusters, who would pay for the carrying costs then?
So if it were a traditional cost of service with no adjusters, that's a good question. So it depends on the type of event that would occur and whether we would seek to create a reg asset for those costs. And if it was, because we've had in power supply certain events that have been essentially almost exogenous, and we would then file for a reg asset, and we would put that reg asset on the books pending PUC order, though, of course, and then that would be the carrying cost would be at WACC, our weighted average cost of capital.
Okay.
So higher than what GMP is proposing here.
Correct. Yep. But there still is, and with no adjusters, there's still risk for the company and the customer, because if we have higher costs, then we would absorb them. And if we had greater benefits, then the customer would not see those. And so that's part of the reason why we have these adjusters. That's a big reason why we have the adjusters.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think Rob has hit this, but just to be clear, so the proposal is really just to cover the actual costs of these mechanisms that on balance, I think we all believe and the evidence shows are positive for customers in terms of the rate smoothing abilities. Those carrying costs weren't previously included, in part just because of what these charts show. The actual asset balance was low and the interest rate was very low, so there's very little cost. But what we've seen is the cost of being able to implement these mechanisms for customers has just gone up. So we simply want to make sure we align those costs with the regulatory approach.
And is there testimony on this specifically?
Yes, Mr.
Okay,
Bingle
great.
and Ms. Doan address it directly in their
Perfect.
testimony.
Thank you.
Commissioner Allen.
Yeah, Mr. Bingo, I just, and as you've been talking through this, I appreciate it. I do wonder, though, if the earnings sharing adjustment mechanism kind of functions as a bit of a backstop to essentially the cost that is here. Does that come into play, or has that historically helped to backstop the cost that isn't being picked up?
That's a great question. And the answer is it does and it doesn't. So it affects the weight and average cost of debt. So when we had this higher short-term debt, that was then caused the weighted average cost of capital to go up, and that was applied to rate base. What it's missing, though, is the quantity. And so these regulatory assets are not part of rate base. And so we do not recover these costs directly. No.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, if we've covered those questions, I think we'll go to Mr. Castengay next on innovation.
Thanks, Jeff. So yeah, in the past number of plans, we've had a really key piece of the regulation here has been the ability for us to do these pilot programs, do these innovative pilot programs with customers. I'll talk in a second about a few examples of those, which folks are probably aware of a number of them, but it's, we're proposing to keep this going with a few minor changes that'll hit, but really, again, the goal here continues to be sort of a way to test whether it's a new a product, a service, something that's going to help customers reduce their costs, reduce carbon footprint, improve their reliability, resiliency, at the same time, reducing the costs for the entire system for all of our customers, giving us new tools to manage an intermittent grid, being able to test and iterate. And we look at these programs and ways to make sure that anybody can participate as well, regardless of income or where they're currently at. You know, the biggest thing is we can, with any of these, as you see when we do the pilot filings, we show the kind of what the program is, what we expect the cost, what we expect the benefits to be. But the thing you can't really predict until you've rolled something out is what is the customer experience going to be? Is it something that actually makes sense? Customers are going to want to participate in, and of course, is it going to produce the benefits and the values that we think it's going to? And until you roll that out to customers, that's always a question, and that's what this allows us to continue to do. And then before moving into more of the full process for tariff or whatever that may be, we're sure that we have the right program to move forward for customers with here. Small change coming up. So, you know, again, this sort of bucket, it expands beyond just capital and rate base, but we talk a lot about it in terms of the capital side of things, because that's what we see with the storage, for example. This is we've done EV charging programs through this, but there are a number of other innovative pilots. The most recent one put in front of you that we're working on is what we call the match pilot, where we have more and more commercial customers especially have been reaching out and have their own specific carbon goal, renewable goal, electric supply mix goal that their customers are asking for, or something where, you know, the traditional fixed tariffs didn't necessarily have the flexibility. We've had something like greener GMP in the past, but now we've got a little more nuance with customers, and being able to do that and test out a platform that helps customers achieve kind of the goals that they have while working within the regulations here, and giving customers some options while also not impacting the non-participating customers at the same time, is something that we've been testing out. We're going to a customer, what we're calling the customer-driven storage program. So think of the ESS program. Will be separated out. Of course, we have a tariff currently, but that is coming to an end at the end of this fiscal year before the start of the next plan period. So we will be most likely coming before you with another tariff filing or an update to that tariff filing, at which time we'll kind of go through the full review process of how the program is working, what we anticipate, any changes we want to make. And then what we're proposing in this regulation plan is that if that moves forward, we would be executing on that each year, and then coming in the following year with during the base adjustment based on customer-driven storage that had been deployed through that process throughout this multi-year plan. You can hit the next slide, Jeff. It just kind of gets into some examples. Again, the storage has certainly been a really big success for customers from the pilot and concept phase to where it is today. You know, the storms that Mr. Burke mentioned earlier that we had over Halloween impacted a lot of customers. We had about 600 customers within the area that was impacted that they were able to stay on. 2,200 hours of backup was provided just by these batteries in the homes in these areas. So folks that are, you know, dealing with situations that have the systems in place, they run seamlessly. They keep the lights on, keep them safe in their homes while we continue to restore power there. And these other two examples down below are sort of more like the non-capital programs, flexible load management, frequency regulation. These are things that, again, we've been able to deploy, get feedback from the commercial customer, work with our partners, iterate, redeploy, and it's become a very strong program. In fact, with flex load, we're looking next to what does the tariff look like now that we have the data. We've got this upcoming winter. We look to work through the final season with our ski areas that are participating. But the ability to quickly iterate, work with the customers, make adjustments, and redeploy is extremely valuable, so that when we do go to the full tariff offering, we have a really solid understanding of what we should expect there. And frequency regulation is just another example where we're taking an existing program, our storage deployment, and adding another new revenue stream that we're able to achieve on top of it. And that's just more value for the host customer and more value for all of our participating customers through the program. And Commissioner Allen.
Yeah, Mr. Casongay, yeah, your comment about frequency regulation just triggered something for me. I wonder, as these programs kind of mature over time, if the company's able to, expand the array of kind of benefit streams that can be harvested, and whether we'll be kind of seeing more movement toward new, market services or other value-added services that can be harvested through these flexible load or storage programs.
Yeah, the short answer is absolutely. So we look at it, and there's this sort of hierarchy that we look at these in terms of what's the most valuable thing at that point in time for our customers. Usually the regional stuff tends to be the more cost-saving opportunity, whether it's the system peak, the New England peak, the Vermont RNS peak. And then we step down through there, right down to, is there a local deferral need coming up? Something that we're beginning to incorporate in the modeling is the notion of transmission distribution deferral benefits, because anything that's becomes needed due to a peak load issue, storage is going to be able to help that. There'll be some, you've got so much energy that you can play with there, but it's going to have an impact and help you lower those peaks and do more. And especially in the fashion where we have distributed it across the state, we can look at the pockets where we need it. The one other example I'll say is this year, ISO New England rolled out a brand new market starting in March it's called Daisy. It's not a daisy, but it's the day ahead ancillary services market. And basically that replaced what used to be the reserve market and has been significantly more expensive than the previous reserve market. One of the things that we're looking at is how can we now leverage the fleet of storage to do anything to offset some of those costs. It's a complicated market, and we're still exploring and understanding like what those ways are. But I'm convinced we can leverage this to at least blunt some of the impact that we've been seeing there. And anytime new markets develop or deploy that we can, by reducing load or shaping load, we would absolutely take advantage there.
Thanks.
Just a quick question. You mentioned here on the slide introducing the BYOD model for the storage. Can you speak a little bit about that and how successful that's been?
Yeah, so when we first rolled out the program, we had sort of two approaches, and still do today. There's we call the ESS, the Energy Storage System, lease program. The customer, GMP owns the system. The customer pays a lease. There's a specific battery, although we're just rolling in a new battery there. It's been the Tesla Powerwall. We now have partnership with Enphase to roll their system in. And then separately was the Bring Your Own Device program, which was basically another path where if customers just for one reason or another didn't want the battery owned by somebody else in their home, didn't want to do the lease, wanted to buy it, you can, as long as it's one of the batteries we can manage and work on, we just pay you an incentive for that battery when you turn over a certain number of kilowatts for us to control during those peak times. That still exists today. Most people do the ESS program, but it's still fairly steady. Customers that want either a different battery or for what, again, have different reasons that they just want to do something on their own with a third party, they can do that, and we'll provide that incentive in that program. And that still exists today as well.
Do you have a sense of what percentage of the batteries out there are BYOD versus ESS?
It's small. I would say less than 10% are on the BYOD versus ESS, probably in that range. I can get specifics for you though, for sure.
Okay, thanks.
Welcome. I think that's all I
Okay.
have, Jeff.
Nope, one more question maybe.
Yeah, question for you. I don't think we've reached this point yet, but when these batteries start to be retired, what is the anticipated kind of retiring and recycling cost, and how is that incorporated into the ESS, not the BYOD, of course, situation?
Yeah, so we have in our new modeling included sort of an anticipated retirement recycle cost. We're working with an entity called Redwood, which basically is a large scale storage recycling entity. And what ends up working out is the value that you get for the battery and the cost to pull it are pretty close to a wash at this point in time. We've added a little bit of cost into the new modeling just to capture some of that, but you know, what we're seeing is at some point the battery will come out, get replaced, and they'll be recycling. They're lasting, and I think they'll continue to last longer than what we put for like even a measure life. You basically end up with some degradation in the storage system, the total amount of energy, but they continue to perform very well. I think our longest running systems now are getting up to the 7-8 year mark and continue to perform very well. But we'll partner with folks like Redwood to then ship them off and have them recycled.
Okay, and that is true of whether it's the Tesla Powerwall or the other brands that you're bringing into the fold?
Yeah, that's correct. Yep, they're sort of agnostic to the system, but they'll work with any of them.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Great. I think we're going to move on to Mr. Burke, but just one quick follow-up on your question, Ms. Papiti, on the BYOD. The data on those programs is reported annually in the GMP annual metrics report. So there's a quick reference there. We can certainly follow up with more specifics, but that is available annually.
Yeah, thanks.
Looks like there's one more question here. Not sure who that is.
Yeah. So you're on mute, and Michael Ivy.
There we go. Michael Ivy with GDS.
Thank you.
On the demand reduction for the items that are in the energy storage, and I don't know if that includes any solar resources or not. I know that grassroots solar was part of the BYOD installers that was on the list, things like that. But how are you measuring the value of the movement in demand? Is it the same across the board for all of them, or do the different devices have different responses, or some more reliable than others, or is it just a peanut butter spread across all of those devices?
No, it's really specific to the program, the device. Because remember too, like FLM's another example here, flex load management, where it's not necessarily a device, but it's a commercial customer, for example, that may be making an adjustment to a building management system or cooling system. So we know what we sort of have a library of assets, of resources, flex loads, battery storage, EV charging, water heaters. We know what they should be able to do, how much power, how much energy. And our team, when we see a peak coming, for example, will create a dispatch scenario based on the most effective approach to that peak, depending on how much is needed, how much we anticipate. And then we know exactly how much each thing performed and can tell, how much peak did we reduce this month. So it depends. Short answer is it depends on the resource. They are all a little bit different in what they can do and what value they bring there.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Okay, Mr.
Thanks.
Burke. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman.
If you want to do a quick follow-up, Mr. Hand, that's great. I was going to suggest that we take a break before we move to system investments. Were you going to follow up
I
or
was
move
going to
forward?
move us on, so happy to take a break.
Okay, so why don't we take a break and come back at 11 o'clock? Great. Thanks, folks.